Hello, and welcome to the first episode of We Are ISACA. My name is Megan Moritz, and I'm the executive producer and storyteller at ISACA Global. I've worked at ISACA for a little over 19 years, mostly with our chapter leaders around the world. But I recently took on a position where I was tasked to help tell the stories beyond someone being an ISACA member. For example, the fact that someone is a member of any organization doesn't make them particularly interesting or unique. However, when we get into what makes that person who they are, we start to identify things that might link us in different ways. The goal of this show is to do just that. Maybe you learn something about someone that is near and dear to your heart and you decide to connect with them, and suddenly you found strength in numbers. We want to start getting to know more about ISACA constituents around the world. And since I'm not a stand-up comedian, past or current, I thought I'd break the ice by sharing a few things about me. So my mom was a school social worker, which means my brother and I grew up being subjected to lots of questions about ourselves. So as I was preparing some of the questions I plan to ask our guests today, I thought about a question my mom asked me not too long ago. What is something you wish others knew about you before you started having a conversation with them? This doesn't have to be fun or interesting fact. It just means something you wish everybody knew so you didn't have to address it every single time you had a conversation with someone new. Also, be sure to tell your friends how amazing this show is and share the video far and wide. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. I have two guests today. My first guest is Joe Mendez. If you've been a chapter leader the past couple of years and attended one of ISACA's 3 virtual global leadership summits, you're likely very familiar with Joe. Joining me after Joe is Allyson Zoller. Both Joe and Allyson are local to Chicagoland, so it happened to be very convenient to do in-person interviews with both of them. Oh, and I'm curious, I'm kind of asking the people on the set here as much as I'm asking you at home. Are there any other cities in the world that add the word land to the end of their city name and it's just perfectly normal and acceptable? Like, I mentioned Chicagoland once before an event and someone later asked me if it was a theme park. I mean, we don't call it Parisland or Tokyo Land. So food for thought. If you can think of any, I'd be interested to know. And with that out of the way, let's get this first episode underway. Please join me in welcoming our very first guest, Joe Mendez. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here and be on your show.
Excellent, excellent. I'm thrilled that you're here for, just to kind of set the tone. You and I have known each other for a long time now.
We have.
And so we have to pretend that I don't know lots of the stories that I'm going to ask you questions about.
Yes.
So that's fun. So we'll do this for everybody's kind of entertainment value. Mm-hmm. And I have some questions that I'm going to whip through here. So I started out by saying, what is something that you wish people knew about you just out of the gate so that you could start the conversation and not have to get into it every time? What is something that you might think about?
Well, so I moved to Chicagoland December of 2020. And I moved there, kind of telltale from my personal brand here, from Hawaii. And when I give people my background or tell them that I moved here from Hawaii, without fail, bar none, the very next thing they say is, why? I don't think I've ever told anybody that moved here to Northern Illinois from Hawaii without being asked that question right away. And that's probably something I'd love for everyone to know ahead of time. I have a canned answer now. Like, I've been asked it so many times, now I just reply that, because the Amazon shipping times are so much faster here. If I want a toaster, I can get it like that.
Right.
Rather than having to say, well, there's a whole number of different reasons. I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years, so living in one place for a really long time was making me feel itchy, right? And I had lived there about 19 years. So I knew I was ready to move on. There were reasons professionally that I wanted to move to a different market. And I knew that this place just felt right to me. But having that whole conversation and talking about those, just kind of over it now. So I just wish everybody knew that.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. And because you've now been here since, I love that you moved to Chicago in December of 2020. So for those of you who don't know, Chicago gets very cold in the winter, and Hawaii doesn't have snow. So how have you enjoyed this change of seasons?
I love it. I mean, part of the reason why I wanted to move here is I wanted to move someplace that had 4 distinct seasons. That's always been on my list of places to live.
Right. And
Christmas feels more like Christmas when there's snow on the ground. And maybe that's because I was raised on movies and TVs to always see that, in film, Christmas time is shown in like a very Midwestern way. There's snow on the ground. Fall is more fall when you can see the colors of the trees change. And I live in a rural area now, so I'm surrounded by farms, and I'm like, oh, I get it now.
Right,
So,
like
yeah.
the corn maze. I remember you telling me that you guys went to the corn maze. You have 2 kids, and went to a corn maze last year. And you're like, oh, this makes sense. There's corn. They turn it into a maze. I get it.
Yeah.
Instead of just artificially, like, oh, it's fall. Let's go do something at the beach.
Yeah, and
So-
the idea of like a fall festival. So I'm originally from Arizona, which in the city of Phoenix. So I grew up in an area that used to be rural years ago, but wasn't anymore. It's very urban. And they would have things like fall festivals at my school, but it was always just more like, oh, that happens at this time of year, but none of the cultural reasons why. But living in a rural area out here surrounded by farms, like, oh, that makes sense. Now that, the farmers who have been just killing themselves working throughout the growing season, the harvest season, now everything, the corn's laying down and all that, now there's a reason to celebrate. It just makes more sense.
Got
So
it.
I've really been enjoying it. I think my family has. At least my family tells me that they have. We've gotten into winter sports and then really making use of summertime and all that as well.
Cool. If winter tubing counts as a sport, I'm in. Skiing, not so much. You travel a lot for work and for ISACA. What is a great travel story that you have? I always love when people travel a lot and they're like, oh, I've got a story. So
I do have a story, and this is the one that involves you. So, pretend you don't know this
Yay.
whole story. So you and I were traveling to Canada to go to an ISACA meeting
Yes.
a few years ago, and we went up north. We went into the city. We had our meeting, and we were coming back. And my recollection is we're coming back. We're in the airport. On the way through into the airport, I remember I look back to you and I say, "Oh, by the way, there is a very good chance that I'm going to be detained by the customs officials for hours. So if I just disappear, just have a good flight, move on to your gate, don't wait for me. This is probably going to happen." And I remember you going, "What?" I'm like, "I'll explain later," because we were approaching the security line. And I go through security, and just like I was expecting, they're like, look down, they look at their computer, which I can't see, they look up at me, and they say, "Sir, you're going to have to come with us." And I'm like, "Okay." And I get taken back to the room, and if you don't know, in just about every major airport at customs, there's a room with no windows that they may take people to, and there's signs on there like you're not allowed to use any electronic device. I've become familiar with this over years, and so I always bring a paper book because you can't bring a Kindle or anything like that, and I'm just ready to sit down and read. Now, this all goes back to years ago. As I said, I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years. And about halfway through my journey with them, doing a lot of international travel, I was coming back from being overseas one point, and I was flying back commercial. And at customs, I remember the customs official looking down at my military ID and saying, "Hey, have you lost your passport recently?" And I'm like, "No, I don't have a passport." At the time, I never did because you could use your military ID to get in and out of the country. And he was saying, "Oh, okay. Have you ever had your identity stolen?" I was like, "No." I was like, "Okay, what are you going on?" I'm like, "No, wait, should I be worried? What's going on?" And that was the easiest time ever. And then every time after that, I would get taken back to the room with no windows, and I'd have to stay there. And eventually they explained it to me because it took no less than like the chief of station at that customs facility would have to come clear me. And they told me, well, what happens is that there is another person with your exact name, your first name, middle name, last name, and they are a drug runner in Colombia. And their birthday, they share a birthday with you. So there's so many metrics that line up for this known fugitive. You're always going to be held and detained. Like, we know it's not, like, you're a Marine, we get it, it's not you, but you hit off a flag that means no less than somebody of my station has to come by and clear you. So just be prepared to spend a couple hours because I'm not always available.
Right.
And so that's evolved, and now that was from years ago, now they have the global reentry, and I've tried to get the global reentry, and that's an entirely different story of going through the process of convincing them that I am who I am and coming back. But I've gone through the process where I've had my global reentry, and then I came back, I did another trip out overseas and came back and did the registration. But I have yet to take one more trip to see if that's going to help. Because they told me that you get global reentry, the filters are more narrow. So that may allow you to come through without a problem. But so I guess it's an ongoing story, but
Right, so we don't know if
We
you'll
don't
be
know.
detained next time. And so you were in the Marines.
Yes.
What is it that you wanted to do when you were like between 10 and 16 years old? Any job, like what was it that you were like, I want to do that when I get older?
My plan for the longest time was to go into the FBI and be
Okay.
a special agent. Going into the Marine Corps was actually a stepping stone for that. So I had some
Do you
time in
work
high
for the
school.
FBI?
I do not.
Oh, too bad.
Going into high school, I knew that was probably the plan I wanted to do. And so I tried to lay out what are the steps that would go into that. And military service was one of them. And it was probably also one of my easiest paths to get from where I was to where I wanted to be. And so I went into the FBI and I did signals intelligence. I went into the Marine Corps.
See?
I did signals intelligence, working for the NSA for about 10 years. And that gave me a pretty heavy tech background and kind of set me up for what I'm doing now. The thing was that when I got out of the Marine Corps, I decided, okay, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get my degree. That's required to go into the FBI. But when I was a junior in college, that was about the time that the US Congress decided they couldn't work together to find a budget. And something called sequestration hit, where they just made across-the-board budget cuts because that was their poison pill plan that says if we can't make a budget by this time and work together, then this horrible plan will go into place that none of us want to have happen. But that went into place. And that led to a lot of different federal agencies having hiring freezes for multiple years. And that was, I think, 2 weeks after I turned in my recruitment package to the FBI, the director came out and said, we're not going to hire anybody this year. And then I'm like, okay. And then that was my junior year in college. When I was a senior, the director came out and said, not only we're not going to hire anybody this year as well, but we're going to have to start furloughing active federal employees. And I was like, okay, well, I need to do something. And I ended up going to grad school as almost a time-wasting tool, like a dodge. I went to grad school, got my master's in accounting, and then I was like, well, I can't get a PhD in accounting. I can't stomach that. And so that led me down the path I was, because I knew I needed to get a job at that point. I had a mortgage, and I had a kid at that point, another kid on the way. So I needed employment.
And you did all this after you were in the Marines?
Yeah, so I did
went
the
to
Marine
college
Corps
afterward.
for about 10 years, and I went to college
Got
and did
it.
all that.
Okay. And so then you decided, wow, I'm going to go do, what do you do now?
I work for Deloitte.
Okay.
One of their IT specialists. I do both IT audits on their external audit side, I do internal audits, and I do cybersecurity consulting as well.
And that wasn't the dream when you were 10?
That was not, no, I didn't plan that out in high school to be like, you know what? I'd love to write a SOC report now one of these days. Yeah.
All right, so if training, money, time were no issue, you could wake up tomorrow and do anything you wanted. Would you want to go work for the FBI, knowing what you know now, or what would you want to do?
No, I mean, no, I wouldn't want to work for the FBI. What I'd like to do is probably be a woodworker. So I like to doing woodworking on the side. I have a pretty respectable shop at my house now. And if I could just do that full time and just make things with my hands and sell them or not,
Right.
And then continue to further my craft and my art that way, I'd be a happy man.
So it sounds like that's your retirement project.
Yeah.
Just gonna do woodworking when that's cool. I can't do anything with wood. I can burn it. I'm very good at that.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about ISACA. How did you end up getting involved? Did you come in the certification route? Did you just join as a member? What was your path to get into ISACA?
Me getting involved with ISACA is a good case of mentoring in action. So I joined Deloitte in 2014. And shortly thereafter, in the Honolulu office, the managing director that led the advisory practice in Honolulu booked a meeting with me. I went into her office, a lovely lady named Carrie Carpenter. And Carrie sat me down and talked to me about getting involved in the community. And everybody in the Honolulu team was involved with a nonprofit or a professional association of some sort. And she looked at me and said, well, Joe, a lot of us are involved with IIA. A lot of us are on the board or we're in their committees or whatnot, but I've gotten to know you over the past couple months, and I think you would be better volunteering with ISACA. And she knew the president of the local chapter and knew that they had a need and said, I really think that's better for you. And I'm like, okay, I wasn't going to argue with the managing director at that point in my career. But when I look back at it, I'm like, wow, like that, she did know me in 2 months. And the payoff of that one conversation is kind of astounding because I worked with a local chapter and started off volunteering in one of their committees and being their programs director at some point, and then kind of transitioned through and got, kind of identified and then groomed for further leadership at the chapter, went to the vice president position and then became their president. And I was the chapter president for a few years and was involved with that chapter until I moved.
And so I've noticed, as I've looked at your profile in our database, that you're still affiliated with the Hawaii chapter. I'm sure Allyson would have some words about that. Come join us, Chicago, you live here. So why have you maintained that affiliation with Hawaii chapter?
Well, when I moved from there, I telling the board as the chapter president that, I have this wild idea. I'm gonna move from here 5,000 miles away to Northern Illinois, obviously to be closer to ISACA global headquarters, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah, of course.
I wanted to make sure that I left and they were still supported in whatever way I could. So, especially in the realm of the smaller chapters that we have worked with around the globe, succession can always be an issue or not necessarily a problem, but it's not as easy as a chapter that has thousands of members to pull from. You have your board of people that are engaged and committed, and you really rely upon them. So even losing one person can affect the entire program. So I've stayed on board with them to always just be available and say, if there's anything that you need, feel free to reach out. And so I'm still, the official position is immediate past president.
Okay.
But those guys are up and running and doing a wonderful job, and they don't really need my help at all. They're doing great.
Okay, well, maybe Chicago needs your help. Allyson, come on and sell that later. All right, so let's see, what other questions do I have for you? Ooh, all right, one last little thing here. Mm-hmm. Tech stuff. Obviously, you're into tech, you work in tech. When you were younger, and I believe, if I remember, you were super into video games and all of that type of stuff. What was your favorite tech gadget or technology kind of invention when you were younger, and what would it be today?
So this is a good question. It's especially being old enough to see like the rise of the internet, something that's always endlessly fascinating. But
you're that old?
Probably, yes, I am that old. The gray hair definitely belies that.
I can relate.
Yeah, I think maybe the advent of gaming and watching the evolution of gaming. So I am old enough that I owned an original NES and played the original NES game, so the Nintendo Entertainment System. Had Super Mario Brothers when it first came out. Had a whole collection of games from there. And then to see that jump from something that you would do in your home to something that would connect people across the globe. So that evolved from, years later when I was in the Marine Corps, living in some barracks in Japan, and then physically daisy chaining a bunch of Xboxes together from one room to the other and having like Halo parties and moving like, this is so great. We can just, all we have to do is have, 100 feet of wire of Cat 5, and then we can all play 8 different Xboxes together. That's amazing. To seeing online gaming come through to now that's the norm, and being able to play and enjoy a game with anybody from around the globe, I think was really interesting.
So what's your favorite game right now?
My favorite game right now, I'm replaying through the Mass Effect series. So those are a couple decades old, but going from Mass Effect 1 through 3 is, that was a game that was really popular because it had a morality aspect to it. The choices you made in the first game could carry all the way through the end of the trilogy and affect the ending that you saw. And so it's been re-released, so I can now play it on my next generation console and with next generation graphics and all that, and kind of see that whole storyline.
And you don't need 100 feet of Cat 5 cable.
I don't.
That's convenient. All right, what's your favorite technology today? Like just like new stuff that you're...
One thing that I'm constantly playing with and am just completely fascinated by is smart home technology. So seeing how you could implement devices and hubs into the infrastructure of your house. And then what are the benefits you can get from that? Everything from the trivial of, I just want to turn off the lights outside. I don't want to go all the way to that light switch, to the ones that have the ability to make an impact globally, like smart lights, or having the electricity in your house and the HVAC systems learn about you in order to be more effective. So not just, oh, your lights turn off automatically and now you're not wasting electricity, but how you heat your home or how you cool your home. Now that we can base that in technology and we can use algorithms to figure out what's the most effective way that you could live green and not die in the winter or still stay somewhat comfortable in the summer. And knowing that you could really optimize that, I think is pretty interesting.
What's next for you? What do you think?
What's next for me is kind of still seeing how like the converging paths of like career and technology evolve for me. So the company I work for really buys into and then fosters the idea that we should all be tech savvy and that we need to constantly be learning about what is the next thing on the horizon and invest in that as a community, learn about it and be able to turn that into an opportunity. So I like that aspect of it. And I like to continue to learn to say, okay, well, what is that next smart home feature, but in the corporate world, that's going to change how business is done.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much. This is a fun dialogue. I actually did learn a couple things about you, so that's fun. And just so everybody knows, Joe is a fabulous cook, and he has 2 wonderful children, amazing wife, and it has really just been a pleasure getting to know you over the years. And so I'm grateful to Carrie for introducing you to ISACA so that I can meet you. Mm-hmm. All right, so we'd like to welcome our next guest, Allyson Zoller. Allyson, if you could join us, that'd be great. Hi, Allyson, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Unlike Joe, this is the first day we've met.
I know. Well, we've been chatting, and we just found out that we live literally right down the street from each other.
Like 4
amazing.
blocks.
Yeah.
It is kind of crazy. I half expected to like see you and be like, oh, that's you.
Yeah.
I've seen you around town.
Yeah. Here I'm walking my dog everywhere in town. So
how long have you lived in Chicagoland?
I've lived in Chicagoland my whole life, mainly in the suburbs. I had a little stint downtown in River North, but yeah, I've been in Chicago my whole life. Unlike Joe, I don't enjoy the seasons, and I'm really looking forward to once my kids grow up to move somewhere nice where it's summer/fall the whole year round.
Got it.
The Amazon shipping times. It's so good here.
She doesn't have to go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Okay, so I started off and I asked Joe this question. So what's something when you meet somebody that you just wish they knew about you so you didn't have to get into it every single time?
Yeah, so I think for that one, it's probably my career and what I do.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do IT compliance and risk, and I've done audit. And a lot of people who aren't in our profession have no idea what that means.
I don't know what that means.
So I spend a lot of time explaining what that means, but ultimately like Joe, I've kind of summed it down to where I'm basically a security guard of a company. And if, trying to make sure that the people internally at a company do not get, ultimately arrested, right? And so, yeah, that's how I explain what I do, but I get asked that all the time and it's blank stares.
Yeah. Do people think you actually stand outside like in a security guard outfit, like don't come in this building?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Put my uniform on every morning and.
Amazing. So do you travel for work or do you travel for pleasure? Do you have a great travel story?
I travel a little for work, yes, but I love to travel for personal pleasure. And, with the pandemic, we all haven't been able to do that much. So a great travel story. I just recently came back from the Tuscan region of Italy. I was literally there last month. It's just gorgeous. So yeah, so that's like the location where I would love to live post, professional career life. So great people, great wine. Great shopping, you can go to the beach, you can hike the mountains, it's just gorgeous there. The food's amazing.
Excellent.
Yeah, so.
And this is embarrassing, sorry for everyone. My geography is pretty good, but in terms of cities, but Tuscany, like what, is there a
The
town
Tuscan
there?
region, it's Florence is the main city in the Tuscan region, Pisa.
Yeah.
Went to San Gimignano. It's a medieval town established in 330 AD. So pretty amazing history.
Awesome.
Medici family is known for, really establishing Florence as it is today.
And so you had told me while we were just having some basic introductions via text and email that you're quite the athlete, or maybe you were a little bit more before COVID.
Yeah, before COVID.
But have you traveled to any type of great destinations to do some of this?
Yes, so I'm currently working on my Abbott World Marathon Majors. There's 6 of them.
Okay.
Chicago, Boston, New York, London, Berlin, and Tokyo. So those are the 6. I've completed 5 back in 2019. My last one was Tokyo. I was supposed to do Tokyo in 2020, March of 2020. So we all know what was going on in March of 2020. So I found out 2 weeks before the race, and actually on my birthday, that only the pros were running the race. Like everybody else, the 40,000 people that signed up to do it could not attend. So yeah, so I'm still waiting, just the average Joe can't just show up to Japan still due to the restrictions. So hopefully March of 2023, I'm still signed up.
I was going to say, you still qualify, you have a spot?
Yeah,
okay.
Still there, still have a spot. So hopefully, I'll be able to go in March of 2023.
And do you these are marathons?
Yeah, these are full distance marathons. I have done triathlons. I love triathlons. So marathons I do for fun, but I love triathlons. And I've done the full distance Ironman. I've done 4 of those, 2 in Wisconsin, 1 in Kentucky, and 1 in Florida. And I'm looking to now slim it down. And so for every decade, I want to do at least 1.
Wow.
Yeah, but I want to get my majors done first. So Tokyo 2023. And also I want to do, there's a club for the continents, the 7 continents marathons. So I've obviously captured a few of the continents. So I have a few more that I need to get to, check that off my bucket list.
Wow. So how long have you been doing triathlons? I just can't even comprehend, I'm going to do a triathlon. That would never even come into my brain.
Yeah. So I actually started doing triathlons right after I finished college, when nobody was really doing triathlons. It wasn't even a thing. Nobody knew about it. I had a boyfriend in college that was doing triathlons, and I started working with someone who was very active in triathlons. He helped me pick out my first road bike / convert it into a tri bike. And my first race was an international distance triathlon. And from there, I got more obsessed with it and went to the longer distances. There's sprint, Olympic, half Ironman, and full Ironman. There's even double and triple Ironmans, which I'm not that crazy to do. It goes over a few days, obviously. But yeah, so then it just gradually, and then I wound up doing my first marathon in order to make sure that I could run a marathon in order to do an Ironman the next year. So my first marathon was in 2000, and it was the Chicago Marathon. And then 2001 was my first Ironman, which is 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then 26.2 mile marathon run at the end.
What's the hardest one? What the most difficult?
Probably the running.
Right?
Probably the running. I love swimming. I love biking. I'm not really a distance runner, so for me that's always been the challenge, and that's why I probably do so much of it, is because I have to work so hard to be a decent runner. But yeah, the running. I'm running a marathon after swimming and then biking 112 miles. It's your legs. They call it a brick, because your legs literally feel like a brick. When you get off that bike, it's nearly impossible to lift them up and start running.
Why do they do it in that order?
Well, if they had swimming last,
that's true.
Things might not work out so well for some people.
No. Especially if you have brick legs, so that would be bad. So let's, we're going to talk about what you do now, but kind of the same journey. When you were younger, I don't want to do the exact same questions, but I think the parallels are very interesting. When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up, or what did you think you were going to do?
When I was younger, I'm big on science. I love science. So when I took chemistry in high school, I love chemistry. So I'm like, this is what I want to do. I went into college. I majored in chemistry my first year, and chemistry college is definitely not like high school college. I'm like, I love chemistry, but maybe this isn't the route for me. So I wound up not picking a major up until the last couple of years, and I wound up doing sports medicine because it's a little bit of the sciences, biology, and then also sports, which I absolutely love. So it's a combination of both. So love doing that, but what I was going to do is go into physician assistant school after undergrad to be a surgeon's assistant. My internship my senior year in college was at a hospital, and after doing the internship, I realized I didn't want to work at a hospital. It's not my personality. It didn't feel right for me. So that's when I kind of switched over, and I said, you know what, working in business is probably more my thing. And when I graduated, it was from undergrad, it was during the tech boom. So companies were hiring anyone to be doing technology, be a technologist, and they train you on the job. So just by having an undergrad, I wound up becoming a programmer. And then while working as a programmer full time, I also did part-time graduate school for an MBA with an emphasis in information systems. And that's how I kind of gradually got into, after being a technologist, moving into the audit / compliance world.
So years ago, ISACA decided that they were going to do these roadmaps, career roadmaps. How did people get there? And they started undertaking this, and it was like 7,000 different paths. None of them were the same, and this is just evidence of the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, I went to school to work in a hospital, be a surgeon's assistant, and who do you work for now?
I work for CME Group in
Okay.
downtown Chicago.
And you've been there?
I've been there for 5.5 years. So I've been in fintech pretty much my whole career, except for in the beginning, I worked at a health care consulting company.
And how did you get involved with ISACA?
So long story short, obviously, once I got into the audit world back in 2004, I instantly became an ISACA member, because that's what you do when you're an IT auditor. And as part of being a member, I wound up, instantly getting the CISA. That's generally what what auditors get as their first certification. And as part of the CISA, maintaining my CPEs, I went to a lot of events, a lot of free training that the Chicago chapter offered. My coworkers, my external auditors, which were Deloitte, were also on the board and also members. So just by networking and attending these, that's how I kind of gradually started moving up the chain. And, once I was a member first, and then, as my friends were directors and board members, they're like, oh, well, if you like this, why don't you just be the director for meetings? So I was a director for meetings for about 4 years, hosting the meetings. And I thought, well, I love hosting the meetings, but I'd like to know, the budgeting and the funding behind it. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to need a treasurer. So why don't you move into the treasurer role? So I wound up moving into the treasurer role. So I've been the treasurer of the ISACA Chicago chapter for a little over 2.5 years now.
Okay.
It's funny how they trick you into, how they facilitate you into it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you hold any other role? I believe you're involved with the She Leads Tech.
I do. I'm an ambassador for She Leads Tech, yes. And I've presented actually at the last She Leads Tech event back in June.
Awesome. And what to you is the most challenging part about being a chapter leader?
Well, I have a full-time job, as we all do. I also have 3 kids, 2 teenagers and a preteen, and they're in itself a full-time job. And then you have this as volunteering, which I would consider a part-time job. So for me, it's really important to give back to my profession and my peers and my community. So I just truly enjoy doing the work, knowing that other people in the Chicagoland area are benefiting from all the work that we're putting in up front. So I work, at nights and weekends. Even, taking the train downtown, I'll be, sending out money, paying bills, sending out invoices, whenever I can find the free time to support the chapter.
Excellent. And you're going to recruit Joe now, right, to join the Chicago chapter?
I was thinking, since he's a member of the Hawaii chapter, maybe we can do like an exchange program with the board members, They can come to Chicago, we can go to Hawaii, see what it's like to lead events in each other's locations.
When I first got involved in volunteering with ISACA Global and got to meet chapter members from all over the country and the globe, I think the number one thing I was asked was, hey, when can we have a regional meeting in Hawaii?
No kidding.
We finally did it.
We did.
We did.
That, yeah.
It was only about, 40 people? But we did it. It's a long way away.
It is far.
Yeah, it's really far.
But
Even if you're
it's
like
totally
in California.
It's totally worth it.
It rained like crazy. We couldn't do stuff that we were supposed to do. We were supposed to have a luau, right? Nope, that got canceled. So we ate inside and I don't know.
Still a fun time.
It was fun. Yeah. It was fun, but it's a long way to go to sit on a beach.
It is, yes.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, so tech. You got into tech, chemistry's a little different than tech.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite things of technology when you were younger?
Okay. I don't know if this is really tech, but I'm an only child, so I had a lot of alone time as a kid. So I had a record player, so I listened to a lot of records. I had a tape recorder.
Did you make mixtapes?
I made mixtapes. Yes. I did like comedy shows. Like I recorded various things on the tape recorder. So I was busy doing that recorded music, pretending I was like a DJ on the radio and, mixing the music. So that, although it's not what anybody would consider tech today by any means.
I love it.
For me, it was, and I still have a record player. I don't have a tape recorder anymore, but I still have a record player.
Do you still have the tapes that you made of you?
I do.
Oh, we're going to see if we can get some of that footage. That's amazing. And you said comedy stuff. Did you ever do anything like, local, just kind of get involved in improv or anything like that?
No. I did some when I was growing up in school. I did some plays and some musicals. Just for fun, but no, nothing outside of school.
Okay. Who's your favorite band artist?
Ooh. Okay, so when I was growing up, Guns N' Roses.
Oh, yes! Mine's Def Leppard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love Def Leppard.
Okay. Now, like in today's world, I don't really have one.
I just keep listening to them. That's awesome. My dad was a DJ when I was growing up.
Oh,
and
that's
so
cool.
like going into the station with him and, just like being able to sit in the other studio while he was doing a show. And it wasn't connected to anything. So we just pretend we knew what we were doing and talking to the microphone. I don't have any recordings of me doing that.
That reminds me, when I was in college, my best friend went to the college right next door to my college. It's 2 miles away. And she did a radio show. They had a local college radio show, and so she invited me as her special guest. So I was actually on the radio for 2 hours every Sunday. I don't know who was listening on Sunday morning, but we were on for 2 hours every Sunday morning, just being goofy and playing
just
whatever,
like this.
playing whatever we wanted and saying whatever we wanted.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love it. And technology today, what's your most amazing thing you think's out there?
Kind of like Joe, I would say it's ultimately I have an Alexa. I've a lot of Alexas in my house. I have an Alexa for my TV. I have an Alexa in my kitchen, for, looking up recipes. I have an Alexa in every room, Alexa in all my kids' rooms, so I don't have to, go up there and talk to them. I can talk to them through the Alexa. Alexa in the basement. I have cameras, video cameras all over the place, even outside. And yeah, so I am IoT, like, up the wazoo in my house, and I absolutely love it. And now that we're back, to being able to travel again, I find myself waking up in the morning in a hotel asking Alexa, what the weather is, and I'm like, oh, there's no Alexa in the room. I'm like, what am I gonna do? I have to look at my phone to see what the weather is outside. So
it's very old school.
I know. Who wants to pick up their phone and look and see what the Alexa? You have Alexa just to tell you. So she puts me to bed at night. I have my lights turn a different color at a certain time in the evening so that I know that it's time to kind of wind down and go to sleep. And all my kids, I'm like, get upstairs, it's time for bed. And I have a meditation, like playing for 10 minutes before I go right to sleep. And then she goes over my calendar.
Lost when you go
this
into
was on
a
my
hotel.
calendar. I knew I was supposed to be here today. She told me last night before I went to bed all the things I needed to do today.
Imagine if one of your kids was named Alexa. That'd be very confusing.
Thankfully not.
All right, so if you could do any job right now, you wake up tomorrow and you're like, I get to do whatever I want. What is it?
You know, I thought about this, and I love to travel. So what better job to have to get you where you need to go than to be a pilot? So I'd love to be, if I could just boom, get in a plane and start flying, I'd love to be a pilot and be able just to fly all over the world and see different places.
That would be very cool.
On the job.
Yeah. I saw an article recently that a woman, a female, obviously pilot for Southwest, started out as a flight attendant and was like, no, I want to learn how to fly the plane. So she went through, learned how to fly the plane, and then her daughter was like, well, this is pretty cool. So she became a pilot straight like out of school, and they flew their first flight together, like commercially, mother-daughter. I'm like, okay, well, that's just amazing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It'll never happen in my life. I like somebody else flying the plane, and I just get on, get off. All right, so what was my other question for you? Is there anything that so since you love to travel, and since you have traveled, when you got stuck at home, right? You couldn't do your marathons, couldn't do your triathlons. What is it that you did to kind of eat up that time?
Yeah, so literally eat up that time. That's the true statement there. So like everybody that was hoarding various things in their houses, I wound up hoarding about 200 to 300 pounds of flour for baking. From Costco, and I wound up baking or learning how to bake the perfect loaf of bread and make Bavarian pretzels. Amazon's amazing like that. You can just order, Alexa, bring me whatever I need in order to bake this. So baking lots of bread, baking Bavarian pretzels. I've always wanted to learn how to play the bass guitar. So I wound up buying a bass guitar, and I took lessons online. So I'm still definitely a beginner bass guitar player, but it's just a lot of fun. So that was enough. That was basically what I did to kill some time.
Learned the bass guitar, baked, and ate the food.
And then my daughter, she perfected the perfect chocolate chip cookie.
The perfect
chocolate chip cookie. It was very, very dangerous in my house at that time.
So maybe like in a future episode, I can come on and be like, hey, remember those cookies? And I'm going to try one right now, and we'll rate it on that.
It's pretty good. That's all I'm going to say. So she stopped. I'm like, no more baking. We don't bake bread. We don't make cookies. We're out of the house now. Everybody's back into their sports and schooling. So it's thankfully we're back to normal.
How much flour do you have left?
No, we went through it a long time ago.
Really? Oh, yeah. I bought like a 10-pound bag, and I think I still have 7 pounds left.
Well, bring it over sometime.
Bring it over, right? Yeah, we can use that to make cookies. Yeah. Excellent. It has been such a pleasure talking to you. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the people listening, or share about yourself?
No, it was such a pleasure to be on the show. It's great that Joe and I were guinea pigs for the first edition of the show. And I'm really excited to be here and sharing my story today.
Cool. Well, if I learn how to sing, because that's like my dream, then I'll hire you as the bass guitarist, and we'll put together a band.
We'll go on tour.
I think we could draw an audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Good.
All right. Everybody, I would like to thank Joe and Allyson for appearing on the very first episode of We Are ISACA. Remember to tell everyone how amazing this was. You guys have to share with all of your network far and wide. But until next time, keep taking good care of yourself and one another. Bye.